Imagine, just for a second, that right now we are living next door to a highly structured, vastly intelligent civilization. I mean, a civilization that outnumbers humanity by 3 million to 1. They've got strict career ladders, they teach their young, they care for their communities, and they even make calculated democratic decisions as a group. We interact with them all the time, and honestly, without them, we would absolutely die. But the crazy part is, they seem completely oblivious to the fact that we even exist.
Okay, let's dive into this. Humanity, in our current recognizable form, has been kicking around for roughly 100,000 years. But this mysterious neighbor? Try 100 million years. They survived the dinosaurs, and they dominated ecosystems way before we ever even thought about walking upright. It sounds like pure sci-fi, right? Well, it's not. In this explainer, we are actually talking about bees.
To really wrap our heads around the magnitude of who we're dealing with, just consider this staggering multiple: 5 times. According to scientific estimates, if you were to somehow put all of humanity on a giant scale, we'd weigh in at about 390 million metric tons. But if you scooped up all the bees on Earth and put them on that exact same scale, they would outweigh us by at least 5 times. The sheer physical footprint they have on our planet is just staggering.
Which brings us to their actual population, 20 quadrillion. That's a 2 with 16 zeros behind it, and that is just the jaw-dropping minimum estimate for the number of bees alive right now, scattered across more than 20,000 different species. To put that daily workload into perspective, this massive, buzzing workforce is out there pollinating 1 trillion flowers globally, every single day.
Section 1. Anatomy of a perfect machine.
Let's look at their biology, because it is wonderfully bizarre. A bee's body is held together by this sturdy chitinous exoskeleton. And believe it or not, because of that chitin, a bee physically has more in common with the cellular structure of fungi than with you or me. And look at their eyes. They don't just have 2, they've got 5. There are 2 large compound eyes that give them this pixelated mosaic-style vision, plus 3 smaller, simple eyes sitting right on top of their head that let them see polarized and ultraviolet light. Also, while it looks like they only have 2 wings, they actually have 4. When they take off, these tiny little hooks lock the front and back wings together into one highly efficient aerodynamic plane, letting them zip around at up to 65 kilometers per hour.
Now, think about how they perceive the world around them. You see a bee's antennae, and you probably assume they're for touching, right? Actually, they're incredibly sensitive olfactory organs. See, bees don't breathe through a nose. They absorb air through pores on their bodies. So those antennae basically act as their nose. And in terms of pure sensitivity, these tiny little appendages can rival and sometimes actually beat a dog's sense of smell. And their sense of taste is even wilder. Just imagine holding a hot, juicy burger in your hands and being able to taste it before you even take a bite. That is literally reality for a bee. They've got taste sensors on their throats, their proboscis, their antenna, and, astonishingly, right on their feet. Tasting a burger through your feet.
The hive's strict class system. So this whole society operates on a brutally efficient hierarchy divided into 3 distinct castes. First up, you have the queen, who's the sole reproducer, but faces a pretty grim end when she gets too old. Then you have the female workers. They literally run the entire factory, but they are worked to death. And finally, the male drones. They exist for one reason only, mating, and they end up facing either a violently explosive death or starvation. Let's break these down.
The queen is basically the living engine of a hive, and her singular purpose is just staggering. Early in the season, she's laying about 100 eggs a day. But as the weather warms up, she ramps that up to an astonishing 2,000 eggs daily. To put that in perspective, at peak season, the sheer mass of the eggs she lays every single day is greater than her own body weight. She goes around checking every single cell with sensitive hairs, which triggers a tiny internal pump to fertilize the egg if it's meant to be a female worker.
Then we have the drones, the males. Honestly, they don't do any work around the hive at all. They don't build, they don't forage, they don't even have stingers. Their entire existence leads up to a high-speed, high-altitude mating flight with a virgin queen, and it is incredibly dramatic. If a drone is actually fast enough to catch the queen midair, the act of mating creates this immense hydrostatic pressure, literally a huge buildup of internal fluids, and he dies instantly in a literal explosion, falling right out of the sky. And if he fails to mate before winter rolls around, the female workers just forcibly drag him out of the hive to starve. It's an absolute Shakespearean tragedy.
Inside the honey factory. Okay, so this factory operates on a highly structured corporate ladder. A worker bee doesn't just do one job.
Throughout her really short life, we're talking about 30 to 40 days total, she actually gets promoted. She starts out as a janitor, cleaning out cells. Then, she moves up to being a nurse, producing this nutrient-rich stuff called royal jelly to feed the babies. After that, her wax glands develop and she becomes a builder. Later on, she serves a military stint as a guard, before she gets her ultimate final promotion to a foraging bee.
Let's pause on that builder phase for a second, because this is mind-bending. We all know honeycomb, right? A perfect hexagon, an absolute marvel of natural engineering. But bees don't actually build hexagons. I know, crazy. They secrete warm, liquid wax from their abdomens and build circular, cylindrical cells. It's actually the laws of gravity and the physics of the melting wax that naturally settle and flatten those cylinders against each other into perfectly efficient hexagons.
So the crucial point here is the intense, staggering labor required from these workers. Just take the number 240. When a foraging bee brings a tiny sip of nectar back to the hive, she hands it off to a younger receiver bee. That receiver bee then chews that single sip of nectar about 240 times, using special saliva enzymes to break down the complex sugars before she stores it. Imagine having to chew every single drop of your food 240 times. It's an unbelievable amount of work just to create honey.
Now, before a worker can even go out and forage, she has to serve as a guard. And this is a brutal job. Guards protect the entrance of the hive, using what's basically an olfactory passport. Every single hive has its own unique scent. If a bee from another colony, or worse, a wasp, tries to sneak in and steal honey, the guards sniff them with their antennae. If that intruder doesn't have the right scent passport, the guards will mercilessly rip off the thief's wings and legs. And if it's a severe threat, they will sting, sacrificing their own lives to release an alarm pheromone that marks the target for the rest of the hive to swarm and attack.
The final career stage is the forager. These are the bees flying out to gather nectar and pollen, visiting up to 7,000 flowers in a single day. And what's amazing is how they gather it. As a bee flies through the air, the tiny hairs on her body actually build up static electricity. When she lands on a flower, that static literally magnetizes the pollen straight onto her body. She then combs it all off into little baskets on her legs, mixing it with saliva to create what's called a pollen load.
The democratic hive mind. So zooming out, the most famous example of their swarm intelligence is the waggle dance. When a forager finds a really great field of flowers, she needs to tell the rest of the colony. She does this by dancing in a figure-8 pattern, vigorously shaking her abdomen. The angle of her dance relative to the sun tells the other bees the exact direction of the food, and the distance, get this, 1 second of the waggle dance directly corresponds to approximately 1 kilometer flight. It's not just a dance, it is a literal mathematical language. And they use this exact language to make monumental decisions, like, voting for a new home. When a hive gets too crowded, they go through this miraculous process called swarming. Scout bees fly out trying to find new real estate, maybe a hollow tree somewhere. They come back and do a dance to pitch their location to the others. If other scouts like the dance, they'll fly out to check it out for themselves. If they agree it's a good spot, they come back and do the exact same dance. They literally debate and vote, keeping this up until a democratic consensus is reached. Only when the vast majority of scouts are performing the same dance for the same location does the entire swarm finally take off to move in. Which leaves us with this final thought. We share this planet with a civilization that has perfectly engineered its architecture, developed a complex mathematical language, practices democratic voting, and has survived for 100 million years. We humans, we've been here for just a tiny fraction of that time. So are we really the undisputed masters of this world? Or, to this ancient, highly advanced society, are we just some strange, fleeting phenomenon that's eventually going to pass while they just continue to buzz on? Definitely something to think about the next time you see a bee landing on a flower.